Welcome to the Good Reading Podcast, proudly sponsored by Book People Gift Cards. A Book People gift card is the perfect gift for readers of all ages. Simply order your gift card online at bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au. Redeem in any one of over 500 bookshops across Australia. Visit bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au.
Aunt Jane, how can you say that about a lord? Shouted Marianne. Spoil sport, muttered Anna under her breath. Aunt Jane had finally put down the newspaper which absorbed her every morning. Oh, pish, Jane, said Edward. Let the girls have some fun. I'm sure he won't marry either of them anyway. Fanny winced as she noticed her mother's quick frown. Of course, Elizabeth would dearly love to have a lord in the family. Is it fun to dance with a drunken young man? Aunt Jane was asking Fanny's father dryly, looking at him over the tops of her spectacles. Is it a good use of one's time and talents? I think Fanny knows what I mean, doesn't she? How had her aunt known that Fanny hated Lord Smedley with all her heart? She nodded quietly in agreement. Yes, she had been scorched by the comet's burning tail. Anna might flirt and dice with danger, but Fanny herself had no desire for the sport. But a lord, it was Elizabeth. Surely, Jane, you make an exception for the aristocracy. Sounds to me like Anna did very well. Well, doubtless the young man will be coming to call then, Aunt Jane said. What do you think, Anna? Will he be paying your uncle a polite morning call today to pursue the acquaintance? Anna looked at the tablecloth. In her heart, Fanny knew that he would not, and in fact might very well have a sore head this morning and possibly not even remember Anna's name. The silence which answered her aunt's question told its own story. The girls, said Aunt Jane, authoritatively, having got the attention of the whole room, are in training. They are in training to become heroines, like the heroines in stories and novels. Oh, Aunt Jane, Fanny burst out. She couldn't help herself. I'm nothing like a heroine. Nobody will ever write a story about my life. Anna, perhaps. But I'm very ordinary.
Welcome back to the Good Reading Podcast. I'm Erin Christie. Today we're joined all the way from London by Lucy Worsley, who has just released her third young adult fiction novel, The Austen Girls, which follows two of Jane Austen's beloved nieces as they enter society on the marriage market in Georgian England. Not only is Lucy a fabulous writer, she is a very well-known historian and the current chief curator at historic royal palaces. Lucy, thank you so much for joining us. My first question is about the current global pandemic we're experiencing. As a seasoned historian, have you thought at all about your role in this pandemic?
So I actually work at Hampton Court Palace as one of the curators there. So we're very worried that we don't have our visitors coming in to see us at the moment because that's what pays for mending the hole in the roof. So that is really taking up a lot of my time and mental effort worrying about that big problem, like the whole of the rest of the museums sector. But in the long term, I'm not so worried because I think what history teaches you is that over time, some things get worse and some things get better. The only sure thing is that things are going to change. I mean, there used to be a way of looking at history, which is that everything gets better and better all the time. We're on a path to some sort of nirvana. That's called Whig history, and it's out of date. Some things do go backwards. If you look at the rights of women, for example, there's been times when they've improved, and then they have gone back again. It just gives you a sense of perspective, really. I think that in 100 years, people will be studying this, hopefully, and thinking, well, you can't judge. There's good things and bad things that happen equally.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting how sort of layered it all is when you think about it. So going back in time now, you've written, aside from the Austen Girls, you've written a number of young adult novels that centre on historical figures, especially like when they were young women. So I was wondering what led you to want to sort of re-explore these stories. Did you think their voices were missing, or what did you have in mind when it started?
Yeah, well, history is my life. I'm so lucky and proud to be a historian. And the reason that I am a historian is really because when I was 11, I used to read historical novels myself and get enormous pleasure out of them, particularly the books by an author who's not so well known today, whose pen name was Jean Plaidy. Now, if what I love is that if I say, she's not so well known, very often people say, oh, yes, I love Jean Plaidy too. She wrote loads and loads and loads of these sort of romantic historical stories. And what I realise looking at them again now is just how rooted they are in the actual contemporary documents of whatever it is that she was talking about. And she wrote some in the Tudor period. She wrote one about the young Queen Elizabeth I growing up. She wrote one about Queen Victoria growing up as well. And that was my way into these stories. And what I wanted to do was to recreate that experience for today's sort of 11 to 14-year-old girls. Because hopefully one of them in 20 years' time will be going to Hampton Court Palace and doing my job. And I shall be very proud to build in my own obsolescence that way if I can.
I was wondering why. So obviously you said you really loved sort of historical novels as a young girl, but The Austen Girls is your first young adult fiction book that's not sort of connected to a figure of, like, from the royal family, as far as I know anyway. So I was wondering why the change from royalty over to Jane Austen.
Well, I'm interested in royal people, not because I'm sort of crazy royalist, but because they tend to be the best documented people who are alive at any given moment. That's a real attraction. And they also come complete with this massive sort of organism, which is called the royal household, all of their ladies in waiting, all of their servants, all of the people who empty the toilets. It's a fascinating, such rich sources for social history. But I had also, in my life as a non-fiction history writer for adults, looked at Jane Austen, particularly through the prism of the different houses where she had lived during the course of her life. I love Jane Austen. And when I was doing that research, I came across in her letters these references that she was making to her nieces, Fanny and Anna. Jane Austen had these teenage nieces who were coming out onto the marriage market, and they were having to make the sort of choices that Jane Austen heroines in the novels had to make. And as soon as I came across these girls, very different from each other, I thought, I have to make these the heroines of a contemporary novel. So that's what I did. I like to do that. I like to take a real historical figure and then to go on a riff from the sources into what I imagine might have happened with that. And it's just such an alien concept now, being 14 or 15 and being launched into society and being expected to find a husband. Although there are all sorts of resonances with things that everybody goes through at that stage in life. In the story, for example, there's the experience of the very slightly disappointing boyfriend, the one who's just perfect on paper but just doesn't quite press your buttons, for example. I've included one of those.
Yeah, it's so true. I remember when I started reading the book, Fanny reflects on the fact that she has to sort of go out and find a husband, and thinking she was only 15 and sort of being a bit shocked by that. But then, reflecting on whether she'll be liked and her worrying about sort of how she'll come across, I just found that very relatable. So I think there's definitely things in there that definitely stand out. So they're such great characters. I think you're in a really great place in the sense that you find these sort of, because I was reading also that another one of your novels for young adults was about a young girl who was cousins with, is it Catherine Palmer or Howard?
Oh, Catherine Howard. Yes. You're getting your wives of Henry VIII mixed up. But they are all called Catherines. 3 of them are called Catherine. So you have every reason for all this, yes. That story was about Catherine Howard, who was Henry VIII's 5th wife. And she was possibly not even 20 when she got married to him. And by this stage in his life, he was early 50s. He got to the obese, paranoid, tyrannical state. Oh my goodness, what a disparity in power between those two. Yeah. And I'd always had a sense of unease about Catherine Howard, because she's the one who everybody knows, you will read that she was executed for bad behaviour, for flirtations, for having boyfriends that she shouldn't have. And I'd always thought, hang on, really? Could an 18-year-old girl really have had the agency, the power, the confidence to do these things of which she was, accused? And I really wanted to explore that. And I've come up with a different interpretation of her behaviour, which forms the story of that book's called Eliza Rose. It's set in the reign of Queen Catherine Howard at Hampton Court Palace. It's all, and because I work at Hampton Court Palace, I just love doing it because I could recreate all of these places and passages and courtyards and secret hidey holes that I was familiar with from walking around them every day. It's so great at Hampton Court Palace because you are walking where Catherine Howard and Henry VIII walked themselves. I've heard it said that at Hampton Court Palace, only time and not space separates you from these great events of the past. Oh, and Catherine Howard is the palace's most famous ghost as well. She's still there, some people say.
Very interesting. How do you sort of, obviously you love history and that's, your whole life. How do you feel about or how do you approach sort of taking these figures and sort of writing them in from like a fictional sort of standpoint? How do you sort of navigate that?
I think back to the pleasure that I used to get myself in being swept up in a story when I'm 11, and I just turn off my consciousness. I don't think adults will read this. I don't think adults will judge this. I don't think I'm not writing for my friends. I'm writing for the person who I used to be. And I know through meeting young people, they are willing to go on journeys with you. If you say to a group of 11-year-old girls, will you please express the story of Catherine Howard through interpretive dance? They'll just do it, There's nothing holding them back. So I just throw myself into the story and be as unashamedly romantic or icky or colourful as I sort of feel, really, trying always to pay attention to making the plot and the character and all the technical parts of fiction as good as they possibly can be as well. I don't do a whole lot of research for these historical novels. Lots of historical novelists would tell you they love doing the research. That's the best bit for them. But I don't concentrate on that because I sort of hope I've internalized the history stuff. And what I want to work on is the storytelling and the part that to me feels fresh and exciting and different to what I normally do.
Definitely. It's great that you can have access to both of those worlds. That's a great position to be in, I feel. So what really struck me about the Austen girls is the language is really accessible. So obviously you are writing for girls, sort of 11 to 14, but I remember when I was 14 and was obsessed with Jane Austen and really wanted to sort of get across those novels, but I felt quite alienated by the language. I sort of struggled with it. So I was just wondering what your thoughts were on sort of if you think that's essential in bringing both like history and literature to younger people.
Oh, well, don't get me wrong. You can start to enjoy Jane Austen at exactly the same age, but not everybody will. And if there's one thing that comes out of my book, I hope it is the idea that being a writer is a desirable and cool thing to do, and that Jane Austen was a particularly desirable and cool writer. My book is like a warm-up for, hopefully, it's like a flirtation that I hope people will be drawn into and then fall in love with Jane Austen for themselves. And it isn't, it's not fine writing what I do, but I sort of don't care. I will do. I like, in all the type of history that I do, I like to think of myself as the thin end of the wedge. I'm the most. I like to do history that's not even for people who like history. It's for people who think they don't like history. Even I would like it to be the most accessible, the most intriguing sort of way of coaxing people over the threshold into the world of the past, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. Honestly, as I was reading it, I wished that I'd had it when I was 14. And just was finding that language, just difficult to contend with, because I think it would have been a great way to sort of segue into like a real love for Jane Austen.
Well, there's a lot in the book that riffs off Pride and Prejudice, or an unfinished story that Jane Austen wrote called The Watsons, that real Janeites will identify and recognise, and stuff that happened in Jane Austen's real life as well. Like there's a whole subplot involving shoplifting, which was one of the things the Georgians really loved because they were moving into a consumerist society, was shopping. So I've introduced that, and also some background about the way that justice worked in the early 19th century as well. Yeah. So there's layers there, I hope.
Definitely. Was there just sort of a passion for Georgian history that made you want to include those storylines?
Yeah, I really want to make sure that the stories have some reference to the world that existed at the time. Now, obviously, you cannot just enter into the minds of people in the past. Of course, if you're producing a work of history, whether it's fact or fiction, it's a product of the year 2020. But the way people thought in their heads and thought about things like love and friendship and God and justice, they're all so different. And I can't recreate that totally. But what I can do is hint at it, and people might be intrigued and surprised to discover that there were no policemen. If this whole problem that one of Fanny's friends gets into cannot be solved by the police because they didn't exist. So there was this role in society of the citizen detective, if you like, sometimes called the thief taker. And I have conjured this up as an extra string to the bow of Jane Austen, because I'd always imagined her playing the role of a detective in a crime, because she's so good at putting things together. She's so good at spotting tiny clues and cues that I wanted to present her in that role as well. And also, if my girls are girls who are well off, they're rich, they live in big houses. And I was really anxious that the action wouldn't all happen in these luxurious environments, but that they would go sometimes out of their bubble and into places like the House of Correction and meet people who were not so lucky as they were within Georgian society.
For sure. That's definitely sort of how I picture Jane Austen living anyway. And I wanted to ask about the way you wrote Jane Austen in the novel, because I thought it was great. I sort of imagined her as this kind of older auntie, but then doing my research I realised she would have only been sort of early 30s at the time. How was it to write about someone that you admire so much?
Well, one of the big, this is one of the big image problems that Jane Austen has, and has always had, is that people think of her as being like Miss Marple, being a really old lady, a spinster, somebody who has somehow failed in the business of marrying and reproducing. And that's something that started really early on in her career. The Victorians had this idea of her. They found it much more comfortable to think of somebody like Miss Marple having produced all of these crazy books, as opposed to somebody who was actually young and attractive and sexy and liked shopping and acted badly on occasion. And so I wanted to take the image of somebody who appeared to be quite fuddy-duddy and then show that she had hidden depths to her. And I took a great deal of pleasure in doing that. It's because I grew up as a geek, as a swot, as a girl who wore spectacles. And so I always think that people who are geeky and swotty and quiet and interested in writing and who wear spectacles, they need to have their hidden depths revealed.
I love that. I feel like you've really done her justice, which is...
Oh my goodness, that's a wonderful compliment, and I thank you for it most sincerely.
So she was a great character, obviously, but I wanted to ask a little bit more about Fanny and Anna, and you were saying that you sort of found them in your research through sort of letters they'd sort of written. And yeah, I was wondering sort of what it was that stood out to you about Fanny and Anna as well, that made you that really kind of gripped you and made you want to write about them.
Well, one of the things that I did was go to the record office of the county of Hampshire, which is based in Winchester, and I called up and I read the original of Fanny's diary. So a lot of the scenes in the book are taken from days that she described in real life in her diary. Now, she always intrigued me, because this is a plot spoiler, but Fanny did not get married in the way that would have been expected for a girl of her social class and time. Her story was it differed from the norm. So that's why I felt she would make a good heroine. And then her cousin Anna is the most fantastic character, because in real life, Jane Austen herself expresses this. She was a bit bonkers, Anna was. She was very extrovert. She could make crazy decisions. She'd get very angry with people. And her real life story of getting engaged, then breaking the engagement, then going off with somebody else, you couldn't make that up. But it happened. And I also felt for Anna, because she was at a lower level of society. So in Georgian society, the level at which you are at is really important to you. You care that you've got, £200 a year less than the exits. It really hurts you. And Anna she felt that she was always the underdog, not quite where other members of her family were. And, it's often very true, isn't it, that it's not how much money you have per se that matters. It's how much more or less that you have than the other people that you know. And they were obsessed about these things, particularly at this level of society that Anna was at, that was sort of genteel poverty. There was in no way that you could describe her as living in poverty, but that was sort of the way that she saw it, because she didn't live in a mansion. And I wanted to express, her anger at those, ridiculous feelings. The whole point of Jane Austen's novels, I think, the message that I take away from them, is that the Georgian world of upper class women is unfair. Women feel trapped. They are expected to marry for money. They cannot. They have less freedom, ironically, The women who were lower down in Georgian society, who could go off and be a governess or run a shop or do stuff like that. Their families had these ridiculous, rigid expectations about what nice young ladies did or didn't do. And I wanted to see Fanny and Anna coming up against these things and making up their mind about how they were going to react.
It's so great that you could read their diaries as well. I love that they're real people. It just adds a whole other dimension that is really interesting. So I was wondering, we've sort of touched on this already, but I was wondering if there was a reason you leaned towards young adult more so than sort of writing for adults. Was it because you loved stories as a young girl, or was there more to it than that?
I find it very freeing that when I'm writing books, they're not for my friends or my professional colleagues or other historians. It's just for people who are only there for the story. That appeals to me. And all of my books do have, well, it's not so hidden. They do have a message in them. They do have, I hope, there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom, isn't there? There's knowledge, which is the facts about things. And then there's wisdom, which is how to be a better human being. And as well as having entertainment from stories, I think it's great if you can get some knowledge, some facts about what happened in history, but also some wisdom, which is kind of life advice. And if there is life advice in this story, it is, don't care what other people think if you want to try to be a writer.
Very true. No, I really like that. And I think also Jane Austen's books were full of that sort of like things you could take away from them and lessons. So I think you've like replicated that really well.
The reason Jane Austen books are great works of art is because they can be read, like Shakespeare, they can be read on so many levels. And you can read them as fluffy, romantic, love stories. And that's how they often come over in feature films. The girl gets the guy and the big house and it's all lovely, but there's always something slightly sour about the endings if you look carefully. And I think that they're biting satire, really. They look like love stories, but really they are critical of the hypocrisy of Georgian society. And even the heroines don't live happily ever after.
Exactly. I think when I was a teenager, I sort of got swept up in the whole love story aspect, which I think is really lovely and really great. But I remember when I was at uni, rereading Pride and Prejudice and just thinking it was so bitingly funny, like especially all the stuff to do with the mother. I couldn't see it as anything more than satirical. So yeah, I think that there's definitely different ways to read them.
And a little bit cruel as well. And at the end of Pride and Prejudice in the book, right, Lizzie goes after Pemberley, it's fine. And then it's hinted at, she loses her family. Her family are no longer going to be as part of her life in the same way. And you can see how embedded she was in her family. Yeah. And there's just a tiny, tiny hint there. And you think, oh, okay, a lot of good stuff is happening to Lizzie, but there is also a sense of loss.
Yeah, and that is really sad as well when you consider just sort of, her relationship to her sisters and things like that, and her father as well. That is quite devastating to think about. Sorry, I'm getting caught up in talking about Jane Austen and being a geek.
Not at all. It's we could do it all day.
So my last couple of questions are sort of about Jane Austen's book. So I was going to ask, which is your favourite, if you had to pick?
Well, yes. Now, I I often get asked this, and I sort of know from asking other people that most people would say their favourite is Pride and Prejudice. But I personally feel that that's entry level. Yeah. I feel they get better than that. It's a great one to start with, but then you move onwards and upwards. And there's a whole other lot of people who would say their favourite is Persuasion, the last one that's kind of bittersweet and it's about having a second chance and it's autumnal. But personally, I find Anne Elliot, the heroine of Persuasion, just a little bit limp. And my absolute favourite is the one that some people actively dislike this one because it's about a woman who is a bit full of herself, thinks she knows better than everybody else. It's a bit difficult. I can't think why she appeals to me, but my favourite is Emma. And I also think that Emma has the best love interest in it, Mr. Knightley. Yeah. And when I was writing about Jane Austen, I dedicated my book, which is called Jane Austen at Home. This is my book for grown-ups. I dedicated it to my husband, and I called him in it my Mr. Knightley. Aww. And you can tell he's not a Jane Austen lover because he read this and he said, hang on, you made a mistake here. Surely you should have said that I'm your Mr. Darcy. And I had to explain to him that Mr. Darcy really is a little bit arsey. You need to graduate to Mr. Knightley, who Jane Austen herself said, had she ever married, it would have had to have been to a man like Mr. Knightley, who unfortunately wasn't available in real life to her.
No, definitely. I think, Emma's a bit of a dark horse in that sense, and I think I remember reading a quote saying, Jane Austen saying she thought that only she would like her protagonist. And
yes. And another source for her in creating that character of Emma was Anna, her niece. And you can see some very strong features of Anna's sort of headstrong self-confidence and know-it-allness coming out in the character of Emma as well.
That makes me want to go and reread Emma straight away. And I was wondering if you had, so obviously you like Mr. Knightley, but do you have any other favourite Austen characters that you'd like to mention?
Favourite Austen characters? Oh, I love Catherine Morland with her lank hair and her unimpressive, her unimpressive self-presentation. Oh, she's great in Northanger Abbey. Yeah. Other favourite characters. I have a soft spot for Lydia in Pride and Prejudice, the naughty, stupid, ridiculous one. Yeah. The trouble is as well that when you're thinking about individual characters, you also start thinking of portrayals of them in film as well. But we're talking about the actual women on the pages. I love Jane Austen's false mothers. So often in the story, the heroine has a mother figure who's not her biological mother. So the aunt of Lizzie Bennet, that sort of person. They come up time and time again. And in them, I think I see a reflection of Jane Austen's own role as an aunt, a really important character in the setup of families in the Georgian age, because of, the high levels of childbirth death. So a lot of girls wouldn't have been brought up by their biological mothers. They would have been brought up by other figures in the community, aunts, alternative mothers. And I like this idea that the role of the mother can be spread out through a number of people. This is one of the things that I would argue might have got worse over time, because today families are very nuclear, aren't they? They think, right, the mother has to be all in all to her children. The Georgians didn't see it like that. They saw bringing up the children as a job for the community, in which non-biological mothers had a really important role to play.
Very much so, and I think that's definitely prevalent in your book as well, because with Jane obviously being the aunt, and even with Fanny sort of being there for her younger siblings, I feel like siblings played a big role as well, whereas I think it's definitely different these days. Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the reasons that some people say that Jane Austen herself in real life never married and had children is because in her own family she lost 3 of her sisters-in-law to childbirth. And one of them, I think, died giving birth to her 4th child, one her 9th, and then the other one, as in the plot spoiler, in the Austen Girls, she died giving birth to her 10th baby. Wow. Oof. That was the price you paid for having achieved this wonderful goal of marrying a rich man. Hooray! You get to die having his babies. Possibly. That's a dark view of Georgian society, but there was lots of darkness to see there.
Yeah, definitely. Exactly. I think women did get a bit of a poor deal in that sense, but it is very interesting. So I was wondering what comes next for you. Are you going to keep focusing on Jane Austen, or are you sort of consumed with your history work, or what's in the works?
Well, I'm moving into a new project at the moment. There's somebody who has a lot of parallels with Jane Austen, actually, who is Agatha Christie.
Oh, very cool.
Yes, she's just the sort of person I like writing about. Somebody where I feel I might be able to overturn preconceptions that she was bland, popular, boring, and not very deep. And there's lots of books there that I've always loved as well to re-enjoy, to revisit. It's such a scam being a historian, because you get to think about things that I just naturally love and I'm interested in. It's nice.
Lucy, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me today. It was a pleasure and a privilege. We absolutely love the book and we can't wait to read your next one.
Thank you for having me.
This Good Reading podcast was brought to you by Book People Gift Cards. Share the joy of reading with a Book People gift card. To find out more, visit bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au.